Right. Welcome. My name is Ira Reed, and I'm the Library Director of the Southwest Harbor Public Library. Thank you so much for joining us here tonight. We just have a few more days for you to come into the library and see a very well-received hook rug show at the library. And in a few days after, we'll bring in an engaging show from Art Waves members. So if you want to come into the library and see some art, yeah, we've got a lot of good activity for you. We continue to offer in-person and curbside service, and we also continue to offer a greatly expanded electronic collection, if any of you are interested. Please be aware that we're recording this program. It will be available on the library's YouTube channel within 2 days. As you view this program, we recommend that you use the speaker view setting at the beginning. At the beginning of the presentation, please send any direct questions right to me. Later on in the presentation, you'll get opportunities if you want to ask questions directly to the panelists, you can, or you can feed comments into the chat feature. Please be mindful, if you do have a unmuted screen, that you should mute it if you're feeding in some volume into the program. So we're very pleased to collaborate with the Housing Trust tonight. They're known for their commitment to offering year-round affordable housing opportunities for our community, and certainly opportunities that we desperately need. Tonight we have Marla O'Byrne, the Executive Director. We have Joanne Harris, a board member and longtime community member, and we also have qualitative researcher Kyle Shank. So please welcome Kyle Shank.
Hello, everybody. Thank you for having me. I am Kyle, and I get the very lovely task of being the upfront numbers person to hopefully inspire you and not dramatically depress you. But I can't promise that the latter won't happen, but I will do my best to mitigate it. So why are we here today? We're here to talk about the missing middle, or confronting the challenges that I am almost positive everybody on the Zoom call is well aware of, which is the challenges and dearth of affordable workforce housing on MDI. So if we can advance to the next screen, what we're going to talk about is really a specific question. Lynn, I don't know if we're advancing or not, but we're going to give it a shot to see if that cover image will go. We'll try. Or am I the only one for whom it hasn't progressed yet?
No.
I apologize. I'm having some trouble.
That's okay.
It's not advancing. I thought maybe it was because I was muted. And I don't know, maybe it's because so many of you are joining us as we speak, and maybe we've just clogged up the transmission line here.
It can happen. Lynn, I am very good at speaking extemporaneously.
I know you are.
So we're just going to roll with it. Okay, so imagine that what you see on the screen is an article from the Islander from not all that long ago. It basically says, who can actually afford to live on MDI? This is a very interesting question because it's actually 3 questions in one, right? It is a how, it is a why, and it is a who. So breaking that down, it is really, how much does it cost to actually live on MDI? This is a great thing that you can answer with data, right? We can do, there's strong anecdotes. Everyone here on the call, presumably in some way, shape, or form does live here, but we can really answer that one pretty clearly. Then there's the why, which is, why might it cost that to live on MDI? Yep. And so there's some things we can approach next. And then after that is the who, which is really people that are present on this call, right? Those of us who can live here either year round, seasonally in some form or another. And then there's those who can't, the who aren't able to be here, right? Those who want to and cannot find a way to do so. So what we're gonna do, because I think Lynn has worked miracles and we're gonna get this slide presentation restarted, is we're gonna work and answer those questions somewhat sequentially. You did it, Lynn, look at that. You can jump to the next slide. Oh, I think we got it. Ah, there we go, okay, whoop. Back up one, I think. It's all right. Technical difficulties are going to happen. It's Zoom. It's like October, almost second year of the pandemic. These things occur. Okay. So all familiar with this issue. I think if we can get somewhere to the screen where we see the MDI housing article. Either way, just trust me. There's numbers. You're going to see them. All right, there we go. Perfect. Okay. So what is this article telling us? So between 2000 and 2016, there was a jump in the median housing prices in Bar Harbor specifically, but MDI more generally, of nearly 125%. Housing prices went up 143,000 to 320,000, ton of money. If we look at Zillow for July of 2021, so just a few months ago, the median listing was 438,000. So another price increase, By any way we cut the data, it is listing prices, it is sale prices, it is new assessments, Bar Harbor, Southwest Harbor, Tremont. By any measure, prices are going up, and they're going up quite dramatic, significantly higher than inflation, dramatically higher than incomes, but housing has gone up quite a bit. And this has had a real impact, right? If you look at the 2019 study that was commissioned, 54% of people who live on MDI, or I'm sorry, who work on MDI don't live here anymore. So that number is also increasing, right? I'm sure everyone here, at least anecdotally, can speak to a family member who wanted to come home in the pandemic and couldn't find somewhere to live. They could probably speak less anecdotally about children, families having to leave school districts because they can't find places to live. These things are all part of the course, and they're all over here. So that is sort of the how much does it cost to live here? It's a lot, significantly higher than incomes anyway, and we'll talk about how much more in a second. What we want to focus on now maybe is a little bit of the whys. And so we're going to jump forward and say there's a lot of complicated touch points that may influence what's going on with housing prices, and we're just going to highlight a few and hopefully not pick too many fights as we do so. So we can go to the next slide. Okay, keep going. All right. So one thing that I know has been quite the talk of the town in Bar Harbor, but I presume elsewhere as well, is the rise in short-term vacation rentals, either entire place or private room, but most specifically across MDI and environs, which we'll talk more about. The biggest increase has been in listings of entire homes. So again, caveat here, we are not here to pick a fight about vacation rentals because that is an extraordinarily complex topic. It is neither a pure negative or neither a pure positive, like all things in life. But the fact is that residential properties have commercial value now in a way that was always there, but has significantly less friction now. Where before, renting your own home 20 years ago may have been a difficult endeavor and probably took a lot of time. Now it's as simple as a couple of forms and getting something listed. So more and more homes are repositioning themselves for that, sometimes to just supplement individual homeowner income, which is fine, and sometimes as the pure function of the actual residential unit. So that, in some way, shape, or form, is almost certainly influencing housing prices across the island, at least in terms of resale, if not actual valuation. So that's one thing. We have vacation rentals here. That's causing a specific issue. We can jump forward to the next slide. Then, of course, there is the reason we're all on Zoom today, which is the pandemic, right? Which has had both positive and negative influences on things like affordable housing. As we see here, if we look at some very interesting data from Atlas Van Lines and CNN, the percentage of total moves that were inbound to certain states were unsurprisingly rural states that were very close to major metropolitan areas. Idaho got tons of Californians and folks from Washington. Certain parts of North Carolina got a lot of folks from the coastal regions of the Carolinas. We are getting New Yorkers, Bostonians, all sorts of other rural or metropolitan areas where people are moving into Maine. Now, that is not a bad thing per se, because Maine's death rate is higher than its birth rate. So we need people to move to our state in order to maintain some form of economic stability. And a lot of this may be people moving home, right? We need younger people to stay here. And having people move home during the pandemic was a very, very fortunate thing that we were able to absorb as a state and as an island community. But more people moving from out of state, generally speaking, bring out of state incomes with them, are also going to influence housing prices, right? Hancock County, highest amongst one of the counties in the state, saw an 88% increase in 2020 of newly relocated households. So of the people moving to Maine, they are landing in Cumberland County, in the Portland area, and they are landing in Hancock County, in the greater Bar Harbor, MDI, Ellsworth, sort of metroplex, if we want to make ourselves feel very fancy. So we have the influence of vacation rentals and seasonal rentals in particular, and we have the influence of the pandemic, both of which are really, really complicated, and not the only things influencing housing prices, right? There's a wide variety of things that will. Some that can be fixed, some that can't. But those are probably two of the most pressing that have the largest impact in the past 2 to 3 years. But these make a lot more sense when we then look at numbers, which is the unenviable task I get to do. So we're gonna do a little math together, looking at just a main perspective. These numbers aren't very far off if you compare them to MDI or specific towns. So just looking at the entire state makes things quite easy. So the household income, so not the individual, but if we look at the whole state, the median household income from the latest census data is around $75,000 a year, which is actually on the higher end from a national perspective. If we look at July, the middle of July, the median asking price for homes for sale on MDI was $657,000. Now, that may be a egregiously bad number. Those, as if folks pay attention to the real estate market lately, you'll see that prices are already coming down from July highs, but they're not down in an appreciable way, at least for like our conversation today about affordability. So we're using a particularly high number. I just want to call out that July was the worst month and August significantly improved. So you've got $75,000 a year of the average household for a $657,000 home. If you take those numbers and you use some very unrealistic assumptions, the monthly mortgage payment estimate for that home would be $3,800 a month. So the income needed to afford that, if you use the magic rule of thumb of your take-home income should be 30% focused on housing, you would really need to have $152,000 a year household income to afford that. So the median household income is almost half of what you would need to afford to live in the median home as gross pay, not even net. So forget taxation. Why this is so important with the other parts we discussed earlier is, as I mentioned, unrealistic assumptions. That monthly mortgage payment estimate assumes you have $120,000 of liquid assets to put down, which many in Generation X and millennial age brackets, which ranges from the mid-20s to almost 50 now, are very capital poor. They don't tend to have a lot of money, liquid assets lying around that they can make investments for. So many can't afford down payments. Many have other debt burdens already. Specifically, the 25 to 40-year-old millennial bracket has an incredibly large amount of student debt sitting in their demographic bubble that prevents them from really accumulating capital down payments. Where this nets out is we have homes that are expensive, and we have households that are, by every measure, unable to afford them. So this really sort of makes it quite impossible for many of these households to settle down and actually purchase homes. And with the with the dearth of rental availability, specifically in the two major towns right between Southwest Harbor and Bar Harbor, there's nowhere for these people to go, at least on island, especially if they want to work and live here. This all leads to what we who work and support the Island Housing Trust call the missing middle, right? We have housing availability for those in the lower income spectrum. These are affordable housing opportunities. We have a community affordable housing authority that helps with this, that spans the island and Ellsworth. That is built for families on lower incomes who make significantly less than the median household income, $30,000, $40,000 a year. And then we do have market rate housing for upper middle, upper income brackets, right? $600,000, $700,000 a year homes that can go to people that have very high paying professional careers or who may be working in separate markets but bring their income to Maine with them. But what we lack is this workforce housing, which there's no better term for it, which are people that make around the average income, either between 80 to 120% of it, but who in no way have housing opportunities to them that are easy for them to obtain. Either they can't put a down payment, or the housing just doesn't exist because prices have crept out of that affordability bucket. So this is really a lot of what we're focusing on with the IHT, and I know Marla will talk about this in depth about all the different ways and mechanisms that we're really trying to address this, because it's such a multifaceted problem. But I think what's more important is to kind of give this better personal context for what's going on by hearing stories from people who aren't just going to give you sad, depressing numbers and stats. So with that, I'm actually going to turn this over to Joanne, who will walk us through some really equally profound and way less numbers oriented ways to think about this problem.
Thank you, Kyle, and good evening, everybody. And thank you for joining us this evening. As Kyle mentioned, I'm actually wearing a number of hats tonight. I am the former Human Resources Director from the Jackson Laboratory, almost 30 years there, retired, and became the HR Director at MDI Hospital. But I'm also a nearly 40-year Tremont resident and Vice President of Island Housing Trust. So having had the distinction of being the HR Director at the lab and MDI Hospital, I can tell you, I can attest to the fact that I have done a lot of recruiting over my career. And I would tell you that the number one reason that we lost qualified candidates, we made them an offer, and they had to turn us down. The number one reason being they could not find suitable housing within a reasonable distance from the employer. I would say almost tied, but just slightly behind affordable housing for them was finding spousal or significant other employment. And that was followed for those with children, finding good childcare. So, I mean, there were multitudes of reasons, but far and away, the most pressing issue for those that we lost, and it would have been wonderful employees and great community members, they simply could not find suitable housing. It was not that the lab or the hospital didn't pay good wages, as Kyle mentioned. The wages are solid. These are people who are nurses, they're accountants, they're research assistants, lab techs. These are folks making a very solid salary that simply couldn't find anything on the island. And in the case of the hospital, we had some positions there, and I'm sure that's still true, where you had to live within 20 minutes of the hospital. So that really narrowed their opportunities significantly. The answer to that, when they did find housing, either off island or further than 20 minutes away, is that the hospital still maintains, I'm sure, call rooms for those employees who have to be on call and within 20 minutes. So these folks are not only the backbone of our employers on the island, they're also the backbone of our communities, of our 4 towns. They are the volunteers who serve the numerous nonprofits that are here on the island. They serve on town committees. They coach our teams in the schools. They march in the July 4th and the pajama sale parades. And these are people who want to be part of the community that they live in. And we need that to keep our communities vibrant. And a number of our homeowners that have been able to find good housing through Island Housing Trust have children. And those children feed our schools. And those schools put on plays. The kids come to the library. Children are in a strong fabric of our community. I want to share with you that we, since advertising tonight's event, we heard from our new police chief in Southwest Harbor, Chief John Hull. He said he would like to have attended tonight, but he had another obligation. But he too has been unsuccessful in finding suitable housing, and he has chosen to live in his camper, and that is keeping him apart from his family, who I believe are living in the southern part of the state. So this this is an epidemic for our island community. And I think, yes, there we go. This was a quote from the police chief in Bar Harbor and Bar Harbor Mount Desert combined. You can read it for yourselves. You know, we have emergencies. Things happen on the island. And this is that police chief saying, you know, we might not have enough people that we need to get here fast enough if we really have a situation. So this is beyond just finding employers for the island employers. This is about maintaining the viability of our 4 towns. And a nice byproduct, if we were able to have more folks be able to work here and live here, is we might avoid what happens between 3:30 and 4:30 Monday through Friday. If you've ever tried to leave the island during that period of time, you're very likely to see what I think is the next slide. If I'll tell you what the next slide is, it's actually a little video of the traffic trying to get off the island between those hours. And I've been caught in it, probably all have been caught in it from time to time. That's because so many folks, as Kyle said, more than half the folks who work on the island have to leave it in order to get home after work. And I'd like you to think about what it would be like. Here we go. Lest you have forgotten, and it can be a lot worse than this, but it is kind of endless, and it goes on and on and on and on. And, you know, we have all suffered through this. And believe me, the people in those cars are very anxious to get home. They've put in a long, hard day, and they're not happy about it either, and would love to live on the island. So I'd like you to think about what it would be like if we were not able, and we're already experiencing some of this, if we're not able to keep people who work here on the island and living here. The Colonel's restaurant there on the left cannot serve breakfast, or they're not serving breakfast. They could serve it if they had the help. Sips is in the same boat. They are not serving breakfast either because they don't have the help. As we all know, and this, I suffer horrendously with this. I'm sure many of you do. Real Pizza has had to cut back. I mean, Real Pizza, it's not just about the movie and the popcorn and the pizza, which is all wonderful. It's about seeing each other. You know, at intermission, it's crazy. I mean, it's wonderful. But right now, we don't have it. It's because they don't have enough help. I have also learned that Red Sky has closed for the season, except for pop-up lunches. And I read recently in the article that Kyle was referencing, and I actually did some HR consulting for the Island Nursing Home down on Deer Isle. Apparently, they are going to have to close because they cannot maintain sufficient staff for the residents there. And I just want to remind you that, you know, although, you know, having been an HR director and recruited for 2 of the largest employers, certainly on the island, it's not just about making sure positions get filled. The people who live here are they're also customers. They're sports fans who fill the stadiums at the high school. And let's not forget, they're also taxpayers. And we all want that for our communities as well. So what do we do about this? how can we address this? How can we keep this island pulsating and exciting and a wonderful place to be? And I don't have all the answers, but I know some of them. And I'm now going to turn it over to Marla to walk us through that.
Hey, everybody. So as E-Rich told you, I'm the Executive Director for Island Housing Trust. And I have the best part, I think, of the evening, thanks to Kyle and thanks to Joanne, who gave us both the scale and some of the scope of the problem and what it looks like on the ground, what the impacts are. And Island Housing Trust's work is not strictly about year-round housing. It's about supporting our year-round communities to make sure that they remain viable, functioning communities, whole communities. And we have chosen to do that by providing year-round housing opportunities. And we have tried to be creative and responsive to opportunities. So on the next slide, we have a summary of some of the ways we've done this over the years. And I would say, next slide, we have, we've purchased a house. It was old on the market. It was in a year-round neighborhood. Island Housing Trust bought it, renovated it, brought it up to new code with new electrical, new interior, and we sold it at an affordable price. And in doing so, we enabled a household that that had been living on the island and going through that winter rental, summer rental cycle, and reaching kind of the end of the ability to find the winter rentals and the summer rentals that would allow the head of household to remain in the community in which she worked full-time at a local business and also was a paramedic. She needed to be within a certain range for on-call services. So this opportunity allowed her to stay within a community where she was beloved and where she also gave a lot to the community. So that's one way we've worked. Next slide, we'll talk about a house that was donated to Island Housing Trust. Someone bought a piece of land. It had a small house on it. They didn't need the house and they didn't want to tear it down. So they asked us if we could use it. We accepted the donation. We found a lot that was town owned in Mount Desert. The town residents donated that property for this house. Island Housing Trust built the infrastructure for it, the foundation, the well, the septic, and the landowner moved the house for us. We were very lucky. And we were able to sell it for a very affordable price to a young family. Teacher in the community, someone who worked for Little Notch Bakery. I mean, they've been part of the community, and the young woman who of the family grew up here, and they had moved back because they wanted to raise their daughter in the same community where she grew up. So it enabled one of the island's young people to move back. Next slide. We started by building a neighborhood called Ripples Hill in Mount Desert off Beach Hill Road. It's currently 9 year-round houses. They're clustered. There's a third phase that we have in our future to build another 9 houses. So that was really the beginning, and it was on land donated by the town of Mount Desert. What we're looking at here is the newest neighborhood. We had Ripples Hill with the 9 houses and 9 more to come. We also had Saba Woods on land donated by a landowner with 4 houses in that neighborhood. And this is Jones Marsh, and it is going to be a neighborhood of 10 housing units, 6 single family homes, and we've added 2 duplexes. So we have different price points and different sizes because housing people in different phases of their life and different interests of what they want to, where they want to live and how they want to live. We wanted to provide that diversity and make it possible for more household income realities to be able to buy. We are hoping to break ground on this neighborhood this fall. So keep an eye out. We'll have a coming soon sign on Route 3. It's at the head of the island near the old ocean area. So next slide. We also have a program called the Home Ownership Assistance Program, which helps with down payments. We found over the years when we worked with home buyers that sometimes there are houses on the market. This was obviously earlier. This past year, this might be less of a reality, but there have been houses on the market where a median income household could purchase the house, but often the only obstacle was coming up with a down payment that was sufficient to make the mortgage truly affordable for them. So Island Housing Trust decided, one of the most efficient ways we could help was to have funding available to help with those down payments. Since 2010, when we started this, we have assisted in the purchase of 16 homes across the island with over $400,000 in down payment assistance. And next slide. So so this map shows you where the houses are across the island. The small dots are single family homes and the larger circles are the neighborhoods. And you'll see Jones Marsh with the JM where the new neighborhood is coming. And all of these homes have covenants on them. So while we work with individual households buying a house, it is a benefit that for the community that goes into the future. Each of the houses with covenants, the covenants ensure that the house will resell at a price that's affordable to the next median income household. It ensures that it'll be lived in year round. It just carries that into the future, these houses. So we call it our year-round housing market. And all of this costs money. So Island Housing Trust has, on average, very roughly on average, invested $80,000 per house. We hold covenants on 38 houses. We have overseen the resale of 11 of those houses, seen that the model works where the covenants have kept the house affordable for the next household to buy. And we have been creeping along to get those 38 houses, learning and growing as we go. And last year we kicked off the Coming Home campaign for Mount Desert Island. We are raising $3.5 million. This will help us finish the Jones Marsh neighborhood. It will greatly expand our homeownership assistance program, and it will provide an opportunities fund for Island Housing Trust, because we have lost opportunities over the years because we didn't have the funding available to buy the house right away or to secure land for future housing. So this $3.5 million will greatly ramp up our ability to provide more opportunities and to continue to be creative and responsive to what's needed on the island and what we can do. And you should have all received a mailing recently. I hope you did. It tells more about what we do and what this means for us and for Mount Desert Island. And the next slide shows some of our homeowners. You'll see, very seasonally appropriate. The red furry is a team from Ripples Hill at the Bar Harbor's Pajama Sale bed races several years ago. And some of our other homeowners at home, at work, and at play. So thanks for listening, and we are open for a discussion if people have questions.
Great, thank you all. So we have a few questions that have come in. One is for covenant houses that keep the sale prices down. Is that immune from rising area prices in terms of evaluation and taxation?
That's an interesting question. So our formula for selling the houses looks at what was paid for the house, what the change in median income has been from the time of purchase to the time of sale, and that's what escalates the price, or if median income drops below, you could lose, but that's with any market, and we've never seen it happen. So we look at that determines the price. And we also have a cap of what is considered the maximum a house could sell for to be affordable to the median income at the time of sale. Assessments, the town assessors have looked at the houses, looked at the covenants, looked at what the restriction for resale value is. And I haven't looked at all towns. We're in the process of doing that. But in Bar Harbor, Mount Desert, Southwest Harbor, we have seen that the assessments seem to be tracking what the house can sell for rather than what the market price might be, or the open market price.
We also have a question. What help is there for a single person trying to set out, or the non-standard family, single parents, couples with no children? Workforce housing assumes 2 working adults. What of the 1 income family?
Well, actually, workforce housing doesn't assume a 2 income household. It assumes just a household income. There may be a married couple, but only one works. So we look at what the median income is. We have, a percentage beyond median income that's allowable. But when we look back at who has actually purchased our houses and what they earned at the time they purchased compared to the median income, many of our buyers are at or below the median income. So that would mean this year's median income for the state of Maine is $75,700. We've seen people earning anywhere from 50 to 80,000, that being the range. And that is not always a 2 income household rate.
We also have the question, does Island Housing Trust look for state and federal money?
We do, but because we will, we set our income levels above 120% of median income, that excludes us from much of the state and federal funding. We are currently looking at Maine State Housing for 120% of median income at our Jones Marsh, which we are hoping the duplexes might qualify for assistance with those purchases.
Okay, great. And all right, so great. We got some good questions coming in. Another question from Marla. What's your relationship to Mount Desert 365, and what's your stance on the proposed project to build high density cluster housing in Northeast Harbor?
We have partnered with Mount Desert 365 in the purchase and resale of a house in Northeast Harbor this summer. We were fortunate to have actually the other partner for that was a homeowner. The homeowners were the partners. They wanted to sell their house at a price that would make it possible for an average income household to purchase. They couldn't afford to do that, but they sold their house at a bargain price, and we were able to together, MD 365 and IHT, bring it down even more so that it was more affordable. I don't know a lot about their development in Northeast Harbor. They have 3 properties. I think the planning is fairly preliminary for the one that went to the planning board this past summer. I do think that they are probably considering some adjustments to it, but I also recognize that it's an interesting balance we need to keep. We do need the housing. Those lots are on town water and sewer, which allows for a little more density, but it's also in an existing neighborhood. So there's an interesting balance of developing, I would think, a consensus on what would be acceptable to the village of Northeast Harbor, and how much can be done to provide, housing that fits in the location and provides, a solution to the need.
And do you also partner with other nonprofits or regional organizations?
We do. We have partnered with Maine Coast Heritage Trust a few times, and we continue to look at opportunities. As they conserve land, they look at what might not fit within a conservation priority, but might be better suited for year-round housing opportunities. They're very good about that. We have partnered with Town of Mount Desert, and I'm sure other organizations I'm not thinking of right now, but we find as many opportunities to partner as we can, because this is a community-wide issue, and there are organizations and people who are willing to help. Yeah.
And do you all know of any progress for the concern of the demographic that are in our community for 3 to 5 years that are unlikely to purchase a home, like postdoctoral fellows and graduate students? Are there sort of multi-unit long-term rentals on MDI in the works?
Well, rentals has always been kind of a challenge for us. We know that this is part of the solution that we would like to be able to create. We have a staff of 3. And so it would require building up staff capacity to be property managers, or to build up the ability to hire property managers. Right now, we are looking at partnerships that might make that possible for us to provide rentals. It's in the future, but it is something we are actively exploring. And I don't know, Kyle or Joanne, if there are any things you want to add.
Jen, I can add a little bit on the rental bit if you'd like, but if you'd like to go, you can.
No, the only thing I would say, I'm glad you have something to add, is that this has been a long-standing problem, particularly for the Jackson Laboratory, MDI-BL, because by definition, postdocs come and don't stay, but they are here for a protracted period of time, anywhere from 3 to 5 years. So, yeah, and they would like suitable housing close to their place of employment, because research goes on 24/7. So long-standing problem, something that I'm very aware of. So Kyle, if you have an answer, go.
Yeah, I'll just acknowledge that the discussions at IHT about rentals have been going on for, I mean, well, I was on the board in 2014 and we were talking about it then. So it's, but as Marla pointed out, it's difficult because that change, it requires a significantly larger investment in terms of just operational costs. And every dollar that gets spent on operating is a dollar you can't put into getting someone into a house. So there's some problems there, but the rental problem actually speaks a bit to a question in the chat about zoning. There's sort of two larger problems with rentals that exist that don't exist for sold properties or single family dwelling units people own. And that's sometimes zoning makes it harder, but also rental problems have an extreme closeness to commercial outcomes. And for every rental that could have a year-round tenant in it, every landlord could make most likely 2 times, if not more, money renting that seasonally and just having a seasonal rental that could be lived in the winter. And that exacerbates the issue. And that in many of the towns, zoning can sometimes restrict higher density buildings, but also there is a disconnect in most people don't want to live in high density buildings who actually move here. We have a very large preference amongst people who, when asked what kind of home they want to live in, they want a detached home with property. So oftentimes when this density gets built, it doesn't get occupied, and then it just becomes a seasonal rental. So rentals have their own unique dynamic that are much harder to solve, and they impact a very wide degree of people, which is why I have a Bar Harbor prejudice, so forgive me, but one of the moves that College of the Atlantic just made to buy a couple of homes that had been long-term rentals to maintain them as long-term rentals for their students was out of that exact fear, is once those come up for sale, they will probably not become long-term rentals anymore. So there's a lot of dynamics at play in the rental market that are even harder than the purchase market. So it's a good question, but much thornier.
And there's a question about how your success is going on, your fundraising goals, that you're in the middle of a capital campaign.
Oh yeah, it's been a very exciting capital campaign. We started in September of last year. And since then, to date, we've raised 78%. We're at 2.7 million. And that being said, this is the hardest part, wrapping it up. And we're hoping to complete the campaign by the end of the year. And one of my goals has been $3.5 million, but also a larger local base of membership at any level, because it says so much about the community's support and being behind us in doing this work. So, yeah.
And do you all have any suggestions for if people, could take some action to help, sort of mitigate the housing crisis? Is there anything that, that we all can do in addition to supporting your good work?
I suppose it's keeping informed of what's happening at your town level. If there are ways of voting that helps make that possible. For instance, in Southwest Harbor, we're working with Maine Coast Heritage Trust on the possibility of converting a single family property into additional land and parking for Chris's Pond, plus some land set aside for workforce housing. So that kind of project will need the town's support. And questioning, in conversation to make sure it comes out to be the best project for the community. I think we have been getting calls from homeowners who want to sell their house and make sure it stays year round and doesn't become a seasonal rental because they raise their families in this house. So if you have a house that you're thinking you're going to sell and you want to see that it stays a year-round house, please call us and see if there's some way we can help. And any other creative ideas. We are open to talking about what might happen because communities are so diverse in what people are looking for, what they need, and how we can make that happen.
And did any of you know of whether you guys are working on, sort of seasonal housing for seasonal workers or COA students, or is there other organizations that are, working to help support those needs?
Well, as Joanne and Kyle pointed out, I believe COA is trying to address the problem to meet their needs. We know that Jackson Lab is building housing for their employees. We have been in conversations, very early stage conversations with working with the park on a parcel in Town Hill that might help meet their seasonal park needs and year-round needs, very preliminary. So, wherever we can help, we do, but we also love to see those different housing workforce needs being worked on with other organizations. Just expands what's happening. And Kyle and Joanne, anything else come to mind?
No, you mentioned the lab building housing for their employees. I know that the hospital, when I was there, we arranged with certain renters in the neighborhood that we wanted their rental. And whether somebody was in it or not, we were guaranteeing that they would get their monthly rental amount. It worked beautifully because all of these were within walking distance. And I doubt that those went many times without somebody in them, but it was so worth it to the hospital to work it out with the landlord to just go ahead and sort of reserve that rental and keep it under that umbrella so that it was available for hospital employees until they found a suitable house. So I know that the hospital engaged in that. I don't know if they still do, but when I was there, we definitely had. I think we had 3 of those right in the neighborhood. And those renters were, the landlords were wonderful because they could have made a whole lot more on their rentals had they made it, vacation places to stay. So they were working with the hospital, and that was really important.
So we have a question. Do you use lease model as well as covenants? And do you prefer one over the other?
We use both. We have covenants with fee simple ownership, and we also have land leases, 99-year land lease, with homeowners owning the improvements on the property. There are benefits to both, I would say. The land lease we're moving more towards. It gives us just one additional level of security in maintaining the longevity and affordability of that property. But fee simple with covenants has worked well for more than a decade too.
Great, thank you. And
Yeah.
And as you renovate the homes, do you use sort of passive house energy standards? What sort of protocol do you have as you turn over a house to some new buyers?
I think that is more of an issue when we are building, and we don't aim for passive. But we do aim for energy efficient. We make sure the insulation is good, the windows are good. We use double pane. We look for materials that have a lower VOC so that it's a healthy environment. And we try to keep that balance of making sure the house is environmentally sound, it is lower cost for maintenance, but we still need to be able to make it affordable. And as Kyle said earlier, every dollar we put into each of those features is a dollar that's not available for another housing opportunity. So the board has been talking about the new neighborhood at Jones Marsh and the level of environmental upgrades, we call them, we can do. And we focus very clearly on what has the greatest impact in making that house affordable, both to maintain and to live in. Yeah.
One thing I'll just write off of that, which is helpful, is the majority of the housing stock that we would identify as affordable is also the housing stock that's in the deepest need of rehabilitation. And that rehabilitation will only happen if someone lives in it who wants to live in it. So there's a bit of a virtuous cycle that gets built when someone can actually get into a home that they have ownership over. The likelihood of that home no longer falling into disrepair and having new forms of rehabilitation done to it goes up. So there's also a greater degree of issue of if we want to maintain the long-term housing stock here, because housing, it's always been difficult to build here and the expense will only increase. Getting people to actually live in some of these homes that sometimes are simply just sitting vacant for a good majority of the hardest part of the year is actually another secondary benefit of it, because then they can access other forms of state aid, efficiency main programs, things like that can actually get the home rehab, but has to have someone living in it with a homestead exemption for that to occur. So something else to think about.
And we do have some people sort of circling back, just looking for confirmation about, how one might qualify to work with Island Housing Trust. Again, you need to live or work on the island, and what other sort of parameters.
Yeah. So we have an income eligibility, and it differs among programs and neighborhoods. It's just a reflection of the evolution of the organization. And we have, you can find it on our website, islandhousingtrust.org. We also have an application on our website that can be filled out and submitted online in a secure network. But essentially there's the income eligibility, which is at its highest about 160% of median income. You have to make this your primary home, live in it 11 months out of the year, agree to the terms of right of first refusal to Island Housing Trust when it comes time to sell, to the resale formula that will establish the resale price. And those are the primary requirements.
Great. All right, thank you.
One more thing. You mentioned income. You need to earn a certain amount of your income from work on MDI. It doesn't have to all be, But right now, this year, it's about $16,000 of your annual income needs to be earned from work on MDI. There we go.
There's some enthusiasm for tiny houses. Is that something that you could consider?
It has come up. We haven't found the, oh, good, Kyle. I'm going to
Yes,
send this one to you.
I jumped on that one because it's come up a lot. So my COA affiliation is going to shine through on this one because I've been a part of these conversations for a bit. Tiny houses have to be problems. That's not to say they're not a good idea. I actually believe they are, but for this discussion, they have three unique problems that other kinds of houses don't. The first is that zoning is extraordinarily restrictive against that housing type, especially in Bar Harbor and especially in the downtown village districts of most of the towns. Building those kinds of homes is restrictive because there's square footage requirements and all that. So you have to get zoning laws changed. And our island has historically struggled with getting anything done about updating zoning laws that doesn't just make more of them as opposed to adjusting them. The second part is that we don't really know what the long-term resale of tiny homes are, which is one of the concerns of building housing stocks. So if everyone's familiar with the previous work in Bar Harbor about having municipal funded affordable housing that was built, they built smaller affordable homes in a specific area and then nobody bought them, which gets to our third point, which is preferences. When we've polled people on them, people who work here, people who just live here, the overwhelming majority of individuals would prefer a single family dwelling unit with some form of land. So although there is clearly a demand for a part of the population to want to have tiny houses, and I think that's great. What we don't know yet is if that is a way that you'd invest and get people in homes. Once those individuals either sell those homes or move away or grow their size of their family and need to scale up, we don't know if they'll ever actually resell. And then they'll just become another plot of seasonal rentals, which isn't on its face a bad thing, but is actually the opposite of the outcome we're trying to achieve. So that's why tiny homes have a weird dynamic that we're just not sure of yet for a variety of reasons. But the zoning one is the first big problem that no one can get over, at least not yet.
And we have a question about to whom the mortgage paid, and if it's with a bank, does it affect the covenant? And then also what will happen if there's a foreclosure?
So houses are financed in the traditional way. Island Housing Trust doesn't get involved in financing. Let's see. So it depends on the amount that's available for down payment. It depends on people's credit rating, everything that's typical with undertaking a mortgage. We work mostly with local banks. Most of our homeowners work with the local banks. Some banks are able to sell them through Fannie Mae or Freddie Mac. Some banks keep them within their own portfolio. So I don't think there has been a lot of trouble getting mortgages because the house has covenants. Land leases have been a little more of an educational process, but we've been going through that with the banks, and those are now moving through. If there's a foreclosure, the covenants do provide protection for Island Housing Trust to maintain the covenants on the property. If the property is on a land lease and there's a foreclosure, we retain the ownership of the land. If we lose the covenants for whatever reason on that house, then there's the potential that we would then be able to lease it at a commercial rate if the covenants are gone, so that then it becomes a source of income to support other affordable housing somewhere else. But the way the covenants are written, we believe that we would probably be able to retain covenants on the properties. Yeah.
So we might start to think about winding down. I don't know. Is there anything any of you want to add? Marla, Joanne, Kyle?
I'm going to turn to Joanne and Kyle.
Marla, you've done a great job of answering these questions, and Kyle as well. And I guess I would just say that the seed of Island Housing Trust started in the year as we approached the the year 2000. We were trying to think of MDI's future, and we knew then, 21 years ago, that we were going to be facing a crisis. And that crisis is here and is exacerbated by what's been going on with the pandemic and just, you know, the attraction of our home here on this island. We love it, and we are stewards of it. And a lot of people want to experience it. But there really is a year-round community, whether it's January 10th or July 10th. And we want to, the Island Housing Trust is all about trying to ensure that this unique place has what it needs by virtue of having people here on a year-round basis who want to participate in the vibrancy of the communities. And that's important to all of us. And so to the extent that you can help us in our work, it's extremely appreciated. And I hope we've certainly made the case that it's a problem, and we're trying to address it in creative and wonderful ways. Thank you all.
All right.
I guess I would just add that while the pandemic has exacerbated the challenge of year-round housing in some ways, it also, I believe, has highlighted how strong our communities are and how important our year-round communities are. As we adapted to the early days of the pandemic and the stay at home and the isolation, there have been such creative responses from the community to support our year-round community members, to support our local businesses, from the businesses as well to stay in business. It's been an exciting time to see how our community has adapted. And I think it really emphasizes how important it is for us to try and keep them strong.
Marla, do you mind if I give one last bit on that?
Absolutely not.
I'll just add, I think at the height, I was trying to watch the participant count. I think there was over 60 people on this call. And so I would actually like to thank everyone who came, specifically because you said businesses. I know someone earlier, we talked about businesses building homes and all that now. It's people that live in homes. Yeah. It's not businesses. They may build them, and they may build them because they have to, because of all the problems we've talked about, but it's still people that live in them. And so people being interested in fixing the problem is always going to be better than businesses trying to do it themselves. So I just would say thank you to everyone for actually being here. So.
All right, well, thank you everybody for coming out tonight. This is, yeah, we're definitely in for some challenges, but this really felt like positive progress, and thanks all for your important work with the Island Housing Trust. All right, thank you. All right, have a good night, everybody.